Mark, how you doing, buddy?
Hey, Aaron, good to talk to you, man.
Yeah, I appreciate you taking some time for us. I guess first things first, what was your reaction when you'd found out that Alabama had taken the radical step of firing Greg Goff after just one season here in Tuscaloosa?
Well, I guess I was a little bit surprised. I thought that that was pretty quick. You typically get more than a year to put your stamp on a program. Then you look at where it went wrong. Obviously, the wins and losses were a problem, and that didn't help. But I think the bigger issue was just relationships where that was not going well, and there were a lot of people that were unhappy. And I guess you get to a point where you wonder if it's that sour, can you overcome that? And I guess Greg Byrne felt that it had gone too far, and there was no returning from it, and he just decided to move on. It's a tough deal. I met with Greg early in his tenure, and I liked him. He was very personable. I get that some of us in the media, we get a different version of a person than maybe the players or even the fans get at times. But so I was surprised when I started hearing things that things weren't so rosy there, and so all that happened, and you just wonder at what point who's guiding him and what are the the reasons for some of the decisions that were made, and how it got to where it got, because it certainly got bad, regardless of whose side you want to take. So it was an atrocious season on the field, and then off the field, it sounds like it was there were a lot of unhappy people as well, and it got away. And when that happens, there's sometimes you get a year to kind of figure it out, but in this case, he didn't. And because of that, for the second time in 12 months, Alabama's looking for a baseball coach.
Mark, on all the public face that was put on this that did him in was the attempting to manage his roster, which anybody that knows anything about college baseball knows that goes on all the time. It may be in how he went about it, but how out there is the rule, the recent rule with the Power Five not being able to limit or take away scholarships. Is that pretty well known? Because I've had several people reach out to me who really didn't know that this fairly new rule, I think it came about in 2015, existed. And how do coaches get around doing this without ending up like Greg Goff, where you've ticked off your entire team and parents start making phone calls and all that stuff?
Yeah, well, usually it's a few players. It's not so many. And I think that's where the problem came in with him is, they had some good players that they had to commit a lot of scholarship money to. Because keep in mind, none of these are full scholarships; they're all partial.
Right.
And so when you do that, sometimes you overcommit. And if all of these guys show up, you have to plan for the draft. Some of them are going to go pro, some of them are not. You don't know who on your roster is going pro. It's a difficult situation in the best of times. And then when he's trying to basically revamp his roster into a style of play that suits what he wants to do, it was challenging. And so I think the problem there is the sheer volume of people who are going to be impacted. In traditional roster management situation, call it process, if you will, where the players typically will be told, hey, we got this other, you play third base, there's this third baseman we're bringing in. We really like him a lot. We feel like he's going to get the majority of the playing time. You might be better suited to go somewhere else. And I'm telling you this for your own good. If you want to play, maybe you need to reevaluate things. And a lot of times the players will take that and they will move on, and that will free up that scholarship money to give to someone else. while if you do that with 3 or 4 guys, nobody tends to notice. If you do that with, from what we heard, a large portion, double-digit players, that's a little harder optics, and I think because of that, it's then people start looking at the rule books and trying to find reasons to get back at a coach, and maybe his bedside manner wasn't the greatest delivering the message, and you put those together, add in the one-loss record and some of the other stories that were floating around, and you see where we are.
Mark, you and I have shared a press box together. We've had conversations. Quite frankly, it's going to be tough for the fan base to hear, but it's not a great fan base here at Alabama for baseball for whatever reason. I think it can be again. It was once, but for casual people that only look up when things are going really well or when things are going abysmal, what changed in the mid to late 90s when Alabama and Jim Wells really had it going to where they are now, where they're at best a middle-of-the-road SEC program?
Yeah, I think everyone else kind of caught up and then passed them. I think a big part of that, frankly, was the administration's the lack of speed, the lack of urgency they took with facilities, while the rest of the conference, much of the conference, I should say, were improving, were pouring money into it. Alabama was doing great things in football, and that was good enough. And baseball just sort of sat there and languished. And, that was a big reason Jim Wells left when he did. I mean, he was promised several things that never materialized, and, there's frustration there, and you finally just get tired of it. And while, Mitch Gaspard obviously wouldn't be the type of person to make those things public, he had to be frustrated by where he saw his program compared to the rest of the league. And it's, it's tougher to compete. You add in, lack of lottery scholarships. I don't know if we want to go into all that, but there's some out-of-state waivers
right.
for tuition for good students and for junior college players that the University of Alabama doesn't participate in that would help. And those are, it makes it a tough job. And Alabama fans probably don't want to hear this, but it's one of the worst jobs in the SEC because of all of those disadvantages. And so that makes this hire more challenging. It's not that it's a bad job. I mean, there really are no bad jobs in the SEC, but it's not an LSU or, heck, it's not even a Georgia. In Georgia, who hasn't been successful recently, that's a better job than Alabama because of the advantages of Hope Scholarship in Atlanta and Cobb County and all that. So Greg Burns got he's got a tough chore here. However, I feel much better about Alabama's chances to land a quality candidate than I did this time a year ago.
Yeah.
Because frankly, last year's coaching search was an embarrassment.
It really was.
And I know there were some factors involved with health and what have you, but it's a bottom line business. That was not a proud moment.
Mark, I'm glad you said that because, there's certain things I know that I can't say, and I've hinted around about it, and I've, led people right up to the water without drinking it for them. It was an embarrassment, and it didn't show that they placed any priority on the hire to me, and I thought it was a key hire in the program's history, given the fact that you've got this new stadium, you got some momentum you can capitalize on, and then you treated the hire like it was the last thing on your list for priorities. And they ended up with the coach they had. And that's nothing against Greg Goff. I have absolutely nothing against Greg Goff. I just didn't think that was the right hire for that point in their history. But I'm glad someone else came out and said it besides me. Talking to Mark Etheridge of D1 Baseball. This time, now we're here 12 months later. Where does Alabama go from here? What kind of coach can they realistically expect to get? And a coach that comes in, I know you've mentioned how difficult a job it is. But I speaking with you in press box, the right coach can still win here, right?
Oh yeah. Well, one advantage that they have now is that facility is second to none. I mean, it is a real showcase, and people will want to play there. You're in the SEC, you're on TV, you have all this exposure. Scouts are going to see you play. There's a lot of reasons to want to go to Alabama. And the other part is, they were really bad this year. So you're going to get a chance to come in, clean slate, and prove yourself and play right away. So, for these, they got a lot of guys already signed for, to come in this year, but they could go out and cherry pick a few guys elsewhere, late, who may have some opportunities. So I think where Alabama is right now is they're going to look at, those top mid-major coaches that you see every year. This year, I'd say Godwin at East Carolina, Mark Kingston at South Florida, Lovelady at UCF. Who am I leaving out? But that tier, I think, will be evaluated, and you could look at a top assistant who's a really good recruiter. I think with these searches, and you've been doing this a long time too, but it seems like you always value the attributes in a candidate that the last coach maybe didn't have as much of.
Right.
So I would look for someone who's really personable, who's going to galvanize the fan base, who's not that Greg Goff couldn't recruit because we never even saw what he could do there, but it'll be someone who can be dynamic and go out and try to offset some of the disadvantages by just being that magnanimous personality. That would be my suggestion, and really, that makes a lot of sense considering Alabama's situation.
Yeah, and we saw it in men's basketball from a guy in Anthony Grant who wasn't very personable, who did market his program to the exact opposite in Avery Johnson. Wrapping up, Mark, I know this is such a complicated issue. This really could be its own show one day, but do you think the NCAA ever looks at the 11.7? I mean, they say they care about the health of the athletes. When you got 11.7 scholarships you can bring in, it unintended or intended, it puts a lot of pressure on some of these guys' arms. Is it anything we're ever going to see adjusted with the NCAA?
The only way that's going to change is if you break into some sort of levels of D1 where you've got your power programs and your non-power. Because frankly, Aaron, the teams at the lower end of the D1, they aren't allocating the whole 11.7.
Right.
So they're never going to vote for that. So if you split off, then you got a chance because then everyone who would vote for it can actually use it.
Yeah.
So that's what will need to happen to get any sort of change.